Welcome to Performance Car Lounge, where each week we speak with enthusiasts selling their beloved performance cars. This week, we speak with the seller of a Renault Megane RS Trophy. I feel like the car featured in this podcast is often overlooked in the world of affordable fast cars. Even when people think of hot hatches in particular, the cars that most often spring to mind are the Golf R, the Honda Civic Type R, or the Hyundai i30N, and rarely the star of today's podcast, which is the Renault Megane RS. Today we are joined by the owner of a 2021 Renault Megane RS Trophy. Welcome to the podcast, Aidan.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on.
What drew you to the Megane RS?
Well, I've had a whole range of cars over, I guess, my time driving. I've had everything from, I started off in a dual cab Rodeo Ute, an NST 162 Celica, the 2-litre.
Which year was that?
That was the 88.
Yep.
So that was the last of the triangular shape just before Toyota moved to the more rounded liftback and coupe style.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I loved that thing. That was a 2-litre, naturally aspirated, but geez, it could rev. And we bought it off an elderly couple, and it only had about 60,000 kilometres on it at the time, back in about 1999. So yeah, it was in immaculate condition, and I really enjoyed driving that thing. The car I had before the RS was actually a Skoda Octavia RS wagon in the Audi colours, the Nardo grey. Very much, Volkswagen platform, GDI motor, and the DSG. And I had thought I had a 5-year deal on it, but it was actually a 4-year term, and I got notification from Volkswagen that it was wrapping up. So I hadn't even considered my next car, started thinking about what it could be, and I'd really always wanted to get into a Megane, but they'd been quite limiting in terms of 3-door only, manual only, and the Phase 1 Mark IV wasn't, it was, as with all the Renault models, they were really, really complicated in terms of the sport chassis, the Cup chassis, the Trophy and all the rest of it. But we took a drive down to Springwood, and Gus down there at Cricks at Springwood, from the minute he turned this thing on, I just completely drawn to it.
What were you really drawn to? You obviously liked your hot hatches, because I guess this is essentially your third hot hatch. You had the Celica and then the Skoda, which is basically GTI running gear. It's basically a hot hatch. So what about the Renault attracted you over the likes of the Golf R and the i30N and the Honda Civic Type R?
Look, specifically, I've always been drawn to cars that handle really, really well. I had a Proton Satria GTI.
Oh, awesome.
Way back when, and used to do a lot of grassroots club level motorsport in it. So things like, tarmac rallies and hill climbs, and, so I've always been drawn to cars with sort of interesting handling characteristics. Satria GTI had passive rear wheel steering, so the rear wheels would move on the bushing the more that you loaded up the front end. So it had quite a bespoke Lotus tuned. Proton were owned by Lotus at the time, so that was a big draw card. The level of complexity specifically in the Megane around the chassis characteristics, some of the technology used, in the front end, like the Perfo hub that it's called. Ford had something equivalent in its RS models, but that whole concept around the Perfo hub, the 4Control, and then... So
the Perfo hub was suspension technology, I guess, that was designed to reduce torque steer and bump steer, and it had some pretty trick engineering behind it, with fluid-filled shock absorbers that normally found in rally cars, and struts that had a sort of a damper within a damper system. So this is a lot of technology thrown at a road going car. And I guess my question is, it's supposed to resist torque and bump steer. This car puts out a bit of power through the front wheels. Was it successful in doing that?
The took it out for a drive, and we took it onto the highway at Springwood, and I'd never driven something that was, I guess, so highly strung but so coordinated from a chassis point of view, right? Some of the things I'd driven had been a bit parts been slapped together, but this thing with the 4Control, the hydraulic bump stops, the LSD, I just remember giving it a bootful around this 180-degree on-ramp, and I'd never experienced the pull of the LSD to the inside of the corner, and I knew from that moment that it's going to take a lot of convincing not to purchase the vehicle. Has it been successful? It has. Someone described it the other night. It's a very busy, and it's not a very relaxing car to drive. Like, you have to be, you've got to be fully concentrated in terms of where it's going directionally. You take your eye off the road and you'll find it tram lining and really following the contours of the road. But in terms of the torque steer or bump steer, it has knocked it out. But you do feel it, on the exit of corners. It'll want to sort of start pulling you and doing all the fun things that an LSD will do.
Yeah, we should mention there, you mentioned 4Control, which is Renault's four-wheel steer system, which basically under 60 k's an hour has the rear wheels turning the opposite direction to the front wheel, about 2.7 degrees. Yep. And that makes the car much more agile. At lower speeds, and I guess also for car parks, but also cornering at slower corners, it's probably a bit more agile.
Yep.
And am I right when you flick it into race mode, the threshold for the four-wheel steer changes to 100 kilometers an hour?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so sorry to explain the system further. When you get above at those higher speeds, the rear wheels turn in the same direction as the front.
Same direction. Correct, yeah.
Really increase stability. There's a lot happening there. Can you feel that working when you're on the road?
It's probably one of the things that takes the most to get used to in the vehicle. Initially, if you turn in at high speed, so particularly on tighter corners, you do have a tendency to slightly oversteer a little bit, and you can just feel the rear really getting pulled around and dragged through. And when you combine that also with the LSD, the way that the LSD is pulling the front in and the rear wheel steer is pushing the back out, if you were coming from, say, a Golf R or a GTI, where you get that natural lift-off oversteer, that's kind of what it is, but without the loss of grip. So that's probably the thing that takes the most to get used to when you have that change. When you have that changeover in speed as well, like if you're transitioning from about 80 k's an hour to say 120 k's an hour on a slight corner, you can feel that slight change in terms of moving from agility to stability. It almost feels like you cut a rubber band for a second. Right. You don't feel like you've lost control, but it just has this really bespoke feeling to it as it's transitioning through that control range.
And it probably makes it a bit more of a driver's car, because it's another thing you have to, I guess, manage to get the best out of the car and, really learn how the car's going to respond.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very, very bespoke in its handling characteristic. It is not neutral by any sense of the imagination.
Yeah, right. And it's powered by a 1.8 litre turbo that puts out 300 brake horsepower.
Yep.
The engine is shared with the A110 Alpine.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
What's that engine like to drive? Is it a laggy turbo, or is it quite linear?
It's peaky. Yeah, it's peaky. It's very, very highly strung. It has a nice torque range down low, but it's quite surprising how peaky it does feel, considering the torque characteristics and the range in which the turbo is operating. It does make a lot of noise, and it's got adaptive exhaust as well.
So it doesn't it?
Yeah, bimodal. Yeah, so it sounds bloody magic. Yeah, but the engine is super, super strong.
And there's a few different drive modes, and there's like a mode that you can personalize your favorite settings. Am I right in saying that the car stays in that mode when you turn it off? So when you come back and turn it on again, all your favorite settings are still there?
I'd love to talk about everything positive about the car, but that is definitely probably one of its weaker points is actually
Save that one. I'm going to come back to you and ask about some of the weaker points later.
rightio.
So we'll come back to that. The other thing that is worth mentioning is you said that you bought the car new, so you had the choice between the manual gearbox or the 6-speed dual clutch gearbox. What made you choose the dual clutch over the manual?
A little bit of inspiration from being a massive rally F1, just motorsport fan in general. And I'm a huge fan of the DSGs through the Volkswagen range and in the Skoda as well. Drove both the manual and the EDC, and I just actually felt more connected and more drawn to the EDC. It's generally sharp and crisp. There is the odd sluggish change from time to time that you do get generally with an EDC, but it makes a lot of noise if it's in the right mode when it's changing gear. It's something that, wasn't able to replicate in the 6-speed. And I just felt so slick in my hand. It's got the fixed shifters on it as well, which is something that's a little bit different from the Volkswagen range. They're actually on the wheel, but these are sort of sat back, and they're a higher aluminium changer, so I just felt really nice in the hands as well.
Yeah, so they're attached to the column and they don't move. That's correct, right, not to the steering wheel. Yeah, and I believe the DCT version gets 20 extra Newton meters of torque over the manual. But
correct.
The other thing that I thought might have been really appealing to you is the launch control feature that comes with the DCT version. Have you ever given that a try?
I have given it on closed roads a couple of times. Yep.
Yeah, and how do you use that? You pull both paddles, apparently, do you, to engage launch control? And
so into race, pull both of the paddles back full. I don't know what the pressure is, but you got to give it full pressure on the brake, and you'll see it sort of come up on the center screen when it activates. And then I just normally put my left foot on the brake, and just let go and then modulate it. It's actually pretty good. I mean, that's where really the whole front end really does sort of come alive. Like, you don't get any axle tramp out of it, which is really nice compared to my Skoda, which was like that thing, it made a hell of a lot of noise trying to get it off the line. But
it's an awful sound, isn't it? That axle tramp.
It's the worst. Yeah, it's the worst. Yeah. But no, the balance between the front and the rear, and particularly how stiff the chassis is generally, really does keep the front end down, and it keeps the wheels planted.
And I think the DCT also has a feature called multi-change down. So does it actually skip some gears or something if you want to change down quickly? On
change down, if you're coming up to a corner, you're braking, you just hold the change down, it'll skip down 2 gears.
Yeah.
So if you're in fourth, hold down, it'll skip down to second.
And is this car your daily driver?
Yes.
It's quite, I imagine it's quite a practical car. I think it's got over double the boot space of a Corolla hatch if you fold down the rear seats. It's got the Bose sound system. Is it a good daily driver?
It is. I've had 3 child seats in it. Yeah, which
impressive.
That was a surprise. Yeah, I couldn't do that in the Octavia.
Three child seats. Did you have triplets?
3 child seats. No, I didn't have. Just when I got the car, it was just the age range that the kids were in at the time. They were all in some sort of seats. I think I had a booster and 2 forward-facing seats, so that was a huge plus. Yeah, boot size is not too bad. Can't go putting the golf clubs in there with too much else. And from a daily driver perspective, and at the moment I'm doing quite a few trips up and down the highway. As long as I'm going north, it's a pleasurable drive. Going south down the M1 on the concrete.
Oh, that drones a bit, that concrete, doesn't it?
It just shakes the hell out of me the whole way down. But going up north, it's actually it's quite pleasant. You stick it in the right mode, and it becomes quite a decent highway cruiser. Like it'll do very low 6s on the highway.
Yeah.
But get it on the track, and it's doing 30 to 40 litres per 100 Ks. So, yeah.
Oh, if you want to go fast, you're going to burn fuel. So
absolutely.
Have you had it out on track?
Uh, yes.
And
Yeah.
which track did you take it to?
QR.
When you choose to go for a spirited drive, what's your favorite drive to take the car on?
Oh, yeah, Three Fingers up at Brookfield's quite a nice drive. Obviously over Nebo and Glorious. The section across Glorious that takes you down in towards Woodford, really nice, smooth, really well cambered corners, and the car just hugs those cambers, hugs that inside. It's awesome. If I was to, I'd love to take it up to between Cairns and Port Douglas. Love that road up through there. I'd love to take it up there. And I'd love to take it down the Oxley Highway just off Port Macquarie back inland. It's about 120 odd Ks of twisties.
Oh, but perhaps the next owner will get the opportunity to experience those drives.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially.
So if you had to narrow down to your three favorite aspects about the Megane RS, what would your top three aspects of your car be?
Obviously, yeah, the handling, the road presence, and the noise, to be honest. It gets a lot of attention. Not too many things sort of look the way that it does. Like if you're ever approaching one from behind, like it's got a hell of a stance on it.
It sure does. It's got that central exhaust and a great rear spoiler and diffuser as well. Anybody who's listening to this podcast and not watching the YouTube version, head to performancecarlounge.com.au. I'll have all the photos of the car up at the website there so you can see what it looks like. But it is a striking car, and it's got that, I think they call it an F1 blade design on it.
On the front end, yeah.
As well. And you've spec'd it in a colour called orange tonic paint, which is quite striking too. I think it's got a bit of pearl in it. How does that paint react in the sun?
So they lay down the yellow as a first coat, and then they drop the orange over the top of it. And when you clean it and when it's all polished up, like there's not too much looks like it on the road. Yeah, you can really, and depending on where you stand, it really does change how the vehicle appears.
And I think it accentuates those sharp lines and pumped arches that the Megane RS has. It is a unique car on the road.
It's actually one of the strangely, I really do enjoy detailing cars, but it is one of the most, what's the words? It's the most awesome car to detail because it has such great lines and it's very visually pleasing. Once you've got it clean for that 10 minutes that it's not dusty.
Yeah, it would be satisfying to detail. I can see that. And so we've done your three favorite things. So that brings us to the three things that you would change if you could, or you don't like so much about the car. You're alluding to one before. What would those three things be?
The HMI, or the human machine interface, or the infotainment, whatever you like to call it, is
French.
It's mega French. Yeah, it's got, it has. You get into it. It has a profile for each, like a guest profile, like a profile for whoever you want. So you get into that, and then in the different drive modes, it has different customizations, and including the MySense mode, which you can change everything for. But it's got such high resolution in terms of all of those settings. So, for example, if you when you first got into the car, if you were in a certain profile in a certain mode, and then change the EQ settings on the radio, that all stays the same. So then, if you want a little less bass in the stereo when you're in that mode, you actually got to go in, you click that, and it's just, and to get to that, it's about 7 clicks. And it just has this odd, like it's a portrait, the portrait infotainment system's awesome. It's really high resolution. It really works well with CarPlay, but you need to have your hand at this awkward position to hold it in position to be able to then push the touch screen, and yeah, it's just a little fiddly for something that requires, so much attention, both hands on the wheel at all times.
Yeah.
It's been, Renault missed an opportunity when they were rolling the vehicles out to get rid of the known warranty issues with them. So the fuel pump, the BES. So in the performance pack, which this one is, it has the lightweight BES dual battery system. That was an issue. So there's been a few things that, it's had it on the back of the tow truck as well. And really, they should have just been ticked off on PD.
Yeah.
But Renault did let them go out the door. But the good thing is that they're all sort of ticked off and taken care of now. And really, that's probably about it in terms of, dislikes. Everything else is it's a major grin factor every time you get into it.
Yeah. So why are you selling the car?
The interesting thing is that after we got off the phone the other day, I actually have been asking myself the same question. It's about just looking at different experiences now. I'd really like to do some touring in going out bush and doing some four-wheel driving and things like that. So yeah, just have to make that choice there. So that's one of the reasons that sort of looking to move it on. Other than that, it'd be staying well and truly in the stable.
Yeah, the Renault would be rubbish off-road, I'm sure. How many kilometres have you got on the car?
It's just on 50.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just nearly 3.5 years old. Yeah, so just on 50,000.
Yeah. So what we've got here is a hot hatch with all the go fast tech, performance focused, striking looks. How much are you asking for it?
That's a good question. That's just over 40.
I think on your ad you have it for 40,500.
Yeah.
Which is very reasonable given that they were basically 56,990 plus on roads when they were new. And that was only a few years ago. So a performance bargain for somebody out there who likes their French hot hatches, and maybe it looks like you're a bit of a Daniel Ricciardo fan from back in the day when he was driving F1 for Renault, judging by your shirt there. Looks like a Ricciardo era.
It is. It is. Yeah, it is. Very much so.
All right. Well, really appreciate your time on the podcast, Aidan. Thank you very much. And
No. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
And wish you all the best with the sale.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining us at Performance Car Lounge. If you have a performance car with an interesting story that you are selling, contact us at performancecarlounge.com.au.